Good evening and welcome to another journey through time and mythology. Before we step into the demanding world of Aztec priesthood, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Your support helps us continue creating these immersive stories that bridge the gap between our world and those long past. Also, I'm curious. Drop a comment letting me know what country and time you're listening from. Is it midnight in Brazil? Early morning in Japan? Let's create a global community of mythology enthusiasts drifting to sleep together. Now, dim your lights, find a comfortable position, and prepare to experience life as a Quetzalcoatl priest in ancient Mexico. I promise you'll be grateful for your modern life by the time our journey ends. The stars still dominate the sky as you awaken in your sparse chamber adjacent to the temple of Quetzalcoatl. It's 2 hours before dawn, the time when ordinary citizens of Tenochtitlan still enjoy the comfort of their sleeping mats, but for you, the day has already begun. Your eyes burn from insufficient rest. You had barely 4 hours of sleep after last night's midnight observances to track Venus, Quetzalcoatl's celestial manifestation. A young acolyte enters silently, carrying a clay vessel of cold water. You rise immediately, knowing that hesitation brings punishment. The purification begins with this first shock to your system. The frigid water poured over your head and body, symbolizing the primordial waters that birthed creation. You cannot flinch or gasp. Such weakness would dishonor the feathered serpent who endured far greater trials. Your black hair, grown long and matted with dried blood from previous rituals, receives special attention. As a living embodiment of divine service, every aspect of your appearance carries symbolic weight. The acolyte works quietly to arrange it with obsidian combs, weaving in ornaments of jade and quetzal feathers. Your ears and lower lip, pierced repeatedly over years of service, throb with familiar pain as larger ornaments are inserted for today's important ceremonies. Hunger gnaws at your stomach, but you will not eat today. In fact, you haven't consumed a full meal in weeks. Your diet consists mainly of small amounts of amaranth, chia, and water. Occasional sips of pulque, the fermented agave drink, are permitted only during specific rituals. Your body has grown accustomed to this perpetual state of semi-starvation, which the elders say brings you closer to the divine realm through constant lightheadedness and vivid visions. The elaborate dressing process continues as layers of symbolic garments are placed upon your emaciated frame. First comes the loincloth of unbleached cotton, then the tunic decorated with symbols of wind and serpents, Quetzalcoatl's domains. The weight of the ceremonial backrack, representing the temple itself, will come later. For now, your attendants paint your body with striking patterns in black and the sacred blue-green of the deity. You mentally rehearse the day's rituals while being prepared. Any mistake in the hundreds of precise movements, gestures, or words could be interpreted as a divine offense. Last dry season, you witnessed a fellow priest stumble during the equinox ceremony. The following week, he was selected for sacrifice. Whether by coincidence or design, the message was clear. Perfection is the only acceptable standard for those who speak to gods. Outside your chamber, you hear the first stirrings of the temple complex coming to life. The high priest of Quetzalcoatl will be expecting you and 5 other priests for the dawn ceremony in exactly 12 minutes. The temple sits at the heart of political power in Tenochtitlan, and its priests serve as advisors, astronomers, record keepers, and divine intermediaries. Today, you've heard whispers that the emperor himself may attend the midday rituals. The weight of responsibility settles on you like the massive headdress now being placed upon your head. You've trained since childhood for this role, selected at age 7 when you demonstrated an unusual aptitude for memorization and mathematics. 20 years later, you've ascended to the inner circle of Quetzalcoatl's servants, a position of tremendous prestige and even greater danger. As you rise to your feet, you mentally brace yourself for the first physical challenge of the day. The ascent up the temple's steep steps. With your body weakened by fasting and blood loss, each of the 80 steps feels like climbing a mountain. Yet you must appear effortless and dignified, as hundreds of eyes will watch your procession. Any display of human frailty undermines your role as conduit between realms. Dawn approaches as you prepare to leave your chamber. The irony doesn't escape you. You serve Quetzalcoatl, the god of wisdom and life, yet your own existence is defined by the constant proximity to death. Whether through sacrifice, punishment for errors, political intrigue, or simply the physical demands of your role, few priests serve beyond their 40th year. And as the first golden rays of sunlight pierce the darkness, you step forward to begin another day of walking this precarious path between worlds. The temple stands like a mountain against the awakening sky, its stepped pyramid form reaching toward the heavens. As you emerge from your quarters, the cool morning air fills your lungs, perhaps the only refreshing moment you'll experience today. The plaza below already teems with activity as commoners gather to witness the morning rituals, their faces turned upward in anticipation and reverence. Your ascent begins. Each step of the temple requires precise movement, left foot first, always, while maintaining perfect posture despite the weight of your ceremonial attire. The people must see a being beyond human frailty, someone worthy of communing with Quetzalcoatl. Your legs burn with effort by the 20th step, your breathing carefully controlled to hide your exertion. Halfway up, dizziness threatens your balance, a combination of hunger, blood loss, and altitude, but you dare not falter where all can see. At the temple summit, 5 other priests have assembled, their painted faces impassive despite sharing your physical discomfort. The high priest awaits, his elaborate headdress featuring a full Quetzal bird representation that towers above all others. His gaze, when it falls upon you, reveals nothing, neither approval nor disappointment. In his presence, you are merely a vessel, distinguished only by your utility to the gods. The ritual implements await on an intricately carved stone table, obsidian blades of various sizes, bone perforators, woven reed baskets, and vessels of copal incense. The morning ceremony requires blood, your blood, as payment to ensure Quetzalcoatl's continued favor. Without hesitation, you select a maguey spine and draw it through your tongue, the familiar sharp pain followed by the metallic taste that has become as routine as breathing. Blood spatters the sacred paper laid out to receive your offering. It is not enough. The spine moves to your earlobes next, piercing the already scarred tissue. Still not enough. Finally, as the sun crests the horizon, you drive a larger obsidian blade through the flesh of your thigh, carefully avoiding major vessels. You must bleed abundantly, but not dangerously. Not yet. Your blood joins that of the other priests, soaking the paper that will later be burned as offering. The high priest begins the invocation, his voice carrying across the city despite his advanced age. You join in perfect harmony, reciting texts memorized since childhood. 1,342 precise syllables must be uttered in exact sequence. A single mispronunciation could render the ceremony not just ineffective but dangerous. Despite your lightheadedness, each word flows perfectly. Your tongue knows these prayers better than it knows the taste of food. Smoke from burning copal rises thick around you, its pungent scent filling your nostrils and further contributing to your altered state. Through the haze, you perceive the subtle shift that indicates divine presence, a change in air pressure, a deepening of shadows, a quality of attention that comes when the barrier between worlds thins. The high priest's voice takes on a different timbre, speaking words that seem to originate beyond his physical form. The commoners below prostrate themselves as the ceremony reaches its climax. From your vantage point, they appear as a human tapestry, united in devotion and fear. You envy them briefly, their simpler relationship with the gods, their freedom to express discomfort, their full meals and natural sleep cycles. The thought vanishes as quickly as it formed. Such feelings are dangerous indulgences for one in your position. As the ceremony concludes, you're granted a brief moment to recover before the day's next obligations begin. Your mouth is parched, your wounds throb, and hunger has transformed from sharp pain to a hollow emptiness. An attendant offers a small cup containing a few sips of water mixed with honey, just enough to keep you functional, not enough to break your fast or dull your spiritual sensitivity. The day stretches before you like an endless obsidian blade, cutting, precise, and unforgiving. The morning ceremony is merely prelude to the more elaborate midday ritual, where you will assist in preparing sacrificial victims, followed by astronomical observations, tending to the temple's codices, advising nobles on ceremonial matters, and finally, the evening rituals that will continue long after darkness has reclaimed the city. And through it all, you must maintain perfect composure, perfect memory, and perfect devotion. For anything less would mean joining the sacrificial victims rather than preparing them. The narrow staircase leading to the temple's codex chamber feels like a reprieve after the morning's public ceremonies. Here, at least, you can display minor signs of fatigue without risking your reputation or life. The midday sun now bathes Tenochtitlan in heat, but inside the stone repository, cool shadows offer temporary comfort. For acolytes tend to the precious manuscripts, silent sentinels guarding the empire's accumulated wisdom. You settle onto a woven reed mat, your muscles grateful for the momentary rest. Before you, an attendant carefully unfolds a deerskin codex marked with the symbols of Quetzalcoatl, feathered serpents intertwined with wind glyphs and calendrical markings. Today you must verify astronomical calculations critical for the upcoming planting festivals. A mistake here could misalign agricultural activities with divine favor, potentially dooming thousands to hunger if crops fail. Your fingers trace the complex patterns of dots and lines representing the movements of Venus across the night sky. As Quetzalcoatl's celestial manifestation, tracking this wandering star falls specifically to you and your fellow priests. The mathematics required would challenge any scholar, yet you must perform these calculations while contending with physical exhaustion and persistent hunger. Fortunately, years of training have engraved these formulas into your mind more permanently than the glyphs painted on the temple walls. An acolyte approaches with reverence, carrying a small clay pot containing a watery maize gruel. This isn't kindness but necessity. The temple's most precious manuscripts require handling with steady hands. The meager sustenance will ensure you don't tremble while working with the irreplaceable documents. You consume it slowly, savoring the small pleasure while mentally calculating how many days it's been since you've eaten solid food. 14, perhaps 15? The codex before you contains records spanning 200 years, predictions made by your predecessors, observations of celestial events, correlations between heavenly movements and earthly occurrences. Your current task involves reconciling these historical records with recent observations and extending predictions forward for the next 52-year cycle. Should you perish tomorrow, these calculations would outlive you, guiding future priests in maintaining cosmic order. Working by the dim light filtering through narrow windows strains your vision. Many older priests eventually go blind from years of detailed work in such conditions. Yet using torches near the precious documents remains forbidden. Fire presents too great a risk to the temple's knowledge repository. You squint at the intricate markings, ignoring the headache forming behind your eyes, knowing precision matters more than comfort. A distant commotion draws your attention momentarily, the arrival of diplomatic envoys from a tributary city-state. Political obligations will soon pull you from this scholarly sanctuary. As a priest of Quetzalcoatl, god of wisdom and culture, you serve as advisor and interpreter in matters of intercity relations. The emperor relies on your knowledge of languages, customs, and divine will when receiving foreign dignitaries. Your words could mean the difference between alliance and war. Before you can complete your calculations, the high priest's attendant appears at the chamber entrance. The revered speaker requests your presence, he announces, using the formal title for the emperor. You carefully return the codex to its cotton wrapping, memorizing exactly where you've left off. There will be no time to resume this work until well after midnight, assuming today's obligations don't expand further. As you rise, your vision darkens momentarily, the familiar light-headedness that accompanies prolonged fasting. You steady yourself against a stone column, careful not to display weakness before the acolytes. This momentary frailty reminds you of your most recent predecessor in this role. He collapsed during an important ceremony after 3 days without sleep. His replacement was appointed the following day, after his heart was offered to the gods in atonement for his failure. Emerging from the codex chamber into the harsh sunlight, you straighten your spine and compose your features into a mask of serene authority. The knowledge burden you carry, thousands of prayers, historical records, astronomical calculations, ritual sequences, must appear effortless to those who witness you in public. You are not merely a man but a vessel for divine wisdom, a living embodiment of Quetzalcoatl's teachings. And so you proceed toward the emperor's quarters, your mind compartmentalizing exhaustion and discomfort behind a facade of perfect, inscrutable devotion. The imperial palace stands adjacent to the temple complex, a sprawling arrangement of courtyards, chambers, and gardens that houses not just the emperor but hundreds of nobles, servants, and warriors. As you cross the threshold separating sacred and secular spaces, you feel the weight of two worlds pressing upon you. Here, you must navigate human politics while maintaining divine authority, a balancing act more treacherous than walking along a knife's edge. Guards flank the entrance to the audience chamber, their macuahuitl obsidian-edged clubs held at attention. They bow slightly as you pass, their eyes averted from your sacred person. Inside, the scene unfolds like an elaborate codex illustration. The emperor seated upon his jaguar-skin throne, advisors arranged by rank, and visiting dignitaries kneeling at a respectful distance. All eyes turn to you, the living conduit to Quetzalcoatl, whose judgment may determine the outcome of today's negotiations. The emperor, divine ruler though he may be, inclines his head slightly in acknowledgement of your position. This subtle gesture doesn't go unnoticed by the assembled crowd. Though he commands armies that have conquered lands in every direction, even he shows deference to the priesthood. This delicate power dynamic requires constant maintenance. Any perceived weakness in your divine authority could diminish not only your influence but that of the entire religious order. The representatives from Texcoco seek guidance on the matter of tribute obligations during the coming drought, the emperor states, his voice measured and formal. Translation: they want to pay less, but refusing them outright could strain political alliances. The empire depends on willing tributaries almost as much as it relies on military might. This is why you've been summoned, to provide a solution that appears divinely sanctioned rather than politically expedient. You notice a priest of Tezcatlipoca, Quetzalcoatl's divine rival, standing among the emperor's closest advisors. His obsidian mirror gleams darkly at his chest, reflecting distorted fragments of the scene. Your temple and his have maintained an uneasy theological balance for generations. Quetzalcoatl representing creation and wisdom, Tezcatlipoca embodying change and conflict. His presence here is no accident. He watches for any opportunity to elevate his god's influence at your expense. Drawing yourself to full height, you begin the formal divination ritual that will frame your political recommendation. The hungrier you are, the clearer your visions, or so the teaching goes. After nearly 2 weeks of near fasting, your perception has indeed altered, the world taking on sharper edges and deeper meanings. You cast sacred beans upon a ceremonial cloth, interpreting their pattern with practiced precision while invoking Quetzalcoatl's name. The feathered serpent shows mercy to the faithful, you pronounce after careful deliberation. The people of Texcoco may deliver half their maize tribute after the rains return, provided they increase their offerings of jade and quetzal feathers immediately. A perfect solution. The empire gets valuable trade goods now while allowing the tributary state to preserve food stocks. Both sides save face, and your temple receives a portion of the increased luxury items. The emperor's slight nod confirms the wisdom of your judgment. The Texcoco emissaries bow deeply, relieved at the compromise yet still bound to imperial authority. Only the Tezcatlipoca priest's eyes narrow slightly. He would have preferred a harsher stance, reinforcing his god's more severe aspects. Another small victory in the endless theological chess match that underlies imperial politics. As the formal proceedings conclude, you're approached by a noble whose elaborate headdress marks him as a member of the Jaguar Warrior Society. He speaks in hushed tones, requesting a private augury regarding his military campaign scheduled for the next moon phase. The emperor watches this interaction from across the chamber. These private consultations represent both opportunity and danger for you. Accurate predictions elevate your status. Failed prophecies could end not just your career but your life. Before you can respond to the warrior, a messenger arrives breathlessly, addressing both you and the Tezcatlipoca priest. A two-headed serpent has been discovered in the southern market, he reports. The people await interpretation of this omen. Your heart sinks as you realize what this means. You and your rival must now publicly compete to provide the most compelling explanation of this unusual event. Such theological contests often determine which temple receives greater donations, political favor, and sacrificial offerings. Despite your exhaustion, you must now summon the eloquence and authority to outshine your counterpart before a crowd of thousands. Twilight creeps across Tenochtitlan as you climb the temple steps once more, your legs leaden after the theological contest in the marketplace. Your interpretation of the two-headed serpent as a sign of Quetzalcoatl's dual nature, his presence in both earthly and divine realms, ultimately prevailed over the Tezcatlipoca priest's darker reading. A victory, yes, but one that depleted your already diminished reserves of strength and focus. The evening sky transforms into a canvas of deep purples and fading oranges, the first stars emerging like distant obsidian reflections. On any other night, these celestial patterns would command your professional attention, but tonight your gaze remains fixed on the temple summit where the evening rituals await. No priest of Quetzalcoatl has died during ceremony in 7 years, a record you have no intention of breaking despite your body's protests. Drums begin their hypnotic rhythm as you reach the top platform, their deep resonance felt more than heard. 6 braziers illuminate the ritual space with dancing light that transforms the carved stone serpents along the walls into writhing, living creatures. The effect is intentional. Reality and perception must blur during night ceremonies to thin the veil between worlds. Your fellow priests have already assembled, their exhausted eyes betraying what their composed faces will not. The night ritual centers on Quetzalcoatl's cosmic journey, his descent into the underworld and triumphant return bearing the bones from which humanity was created. You take your position, representing the deity in this reenactment. The ceremonial attire for this role weighs nearly a third of your body weight, the massive headdress towering almost 2 arms lengths above your head. Balancing it requires perfect posture and neck muscles hardened by years of similar duties. Incense thick enough to obscure vision fills the platform as attendants light copal in jade censers. The smoke serves multiple purposes, creating an otherworldly atmosphere, masking the scent of blood from earlier sacrifices, and inducing altered consciousness in participants. You inhale deeply, allowing the sacred resin to further diminish the boundaries between your physical discomfort and spiritual purpose. The high priest signals the ceremony's commencement with a conch trumpet blast that echoes across the city. What follows is a precisely choreographed dance that tells the creation story through movement and gesture. Your role requires 27 distinct positions, each held for specific durations while maintaining perfect balance despite your headdress, weakened state, and the smoke that makes the stone platform seem to shift beneath your feet. Midway through the ceremony, you enter the most dangerous phase, the symbolic death and rebirth sequence. This requires you to descend prone on the temple floor, then rise again in a single fluid motion while maintaining the integrity of your ceremonial attire. Your vision narrows to pinpricks of light as you lower yourself, blood rushing from your head. The moment of lying prostrate before rising represents Quetzalcoatl's death, a symbolic parallel you find uncomfortably literal as your consciousness threatens to fade. Through sheer will and muscle memory developed through thousands of previous performances, you execute the resurrection movement flawlessly. As you rise, the assembled crowd below the temple releases a collective breath they had been holding. They cannot see your trembling legs or the cold sweat beneath your ceremonial paint. Only the divine drama played out against the night sky, reassuring them that cosmic order remains intact for another day. Hours pass as the ceremony continues through its many phases. The moon rises and crosses a quarter of the night sky before the final prayers conclude. Throughout, you've maintained perfect recitation of hundreds of liturgical phrases, performed dozens of precise ritual gestures, and kept your divine countenance despite physical agony. Only now, as the high priest signals completion, Do you allow yourself to acknowledge the full extent of your exhaustion? As attendants help remove your ceremonial attire piece by heavy piece, you overhear discussion of tomorrow's schedule. A major eclipse will occur, requiring special observances beginning before dawn. There will be no rest tonight either. After a brief period for recovery, you must join other priests in the observatory to prepare calculations and interpretations for this significant celestial event. The realization settles over you like a heavy stone. Your next opportunity for proper sleep remains at least 2 days away. You wonder, not for the first time, whether your predecessor's collapse during ceremony might have been an act of surrender rather than failure. The temple observatory perches atop a smaller structure adjacent to the main pyramid, offering unobstructed views of the night sky. You arrive after a brief respite that included a small portion of amaranth gruel, just enough to prevent collapse but not enough to dull your spiritual sensitivity. The 3 eldest astronomy priests already occupy the space, their faces gaunt from decades of the same regimen that now tests your limits. Star charts carved on bark paper lay spread across stone tables, held down by polished jade weights. The upcoming eclipse has been predicted for generations, its calculations passed down through temple hierarchies with meticulous precision. Your task tonight is not to anticipate its arrival but to prepare the precise rituals needed to ensure the sun's return. For in Aztec cosmology, each eclipse carries the terrible possibility that darkness might prevail permanently. Your interpretation in the marketplace was adequate, comments the eldest astronomer, his voice dry as ancient parchment. This passes for high praise among the senior priesthood, though perhaps too optimistic. The 2-headed serpent, following so closely before an eclipse. He leaves the implication hanging in the air between you. In the temple hierarchy, even private conversations must maintain careful theology. One never knows when today's words might become tomorrow's heresy. You bend over the calculations, cross-referencing your own observations of celestial movements with the established records. Despite your exhaustion, your mind performs the complex mathematics with practiced ease. This talent saved you from the common fate of orphan children in Tenochtitlan. When temple observers noticed your facility with numbers during a public census, you were immediately claimed for priestly training, a mixed blessing that removed you from poverty while condemning you to this life of prestigious suffering. The emperor asked about you today, mentions another senior priest casually, though nothing is ever casual in temple politics. He was impressed by your handling of the Texcoco tribute negotiation. You maintain focused attention on the star charts, betraying no reaction to this dangerous information. Imperial favor often precedes either significant advancement or spectacular downfall. Many priests who grew too prominent found themselves selected for the highest honor, becoming the embodiment of Quetzalcoatl during yearly sacrificial festivals, a role that culminated in heart extraction atop this very temple. Hours pass in careful preparation for tomorrow's eclipse rituals. Your back aches from bending over the tables, your eyes strain in the dim light of tallow candles. Outside the observatory entrance, you glimpse an acolyte sleeping while awaiting orders, a simple comfort denied to full priests. You cannot remember the last time you slept deeply enough to dream. Some senior priests claim they haven't truly slept in years, existing in a perpetual state between wakefulness and hallucination. As the night deepens toward morning, conversation turns to a former colleague, a priest who served 3 positions below your current rank. His absence has been notable for several days, though none dared mention it until now. His heart was pure, says the eldest astronomer, using the formal euphemism for sacrificial selection. No further explanation is necessary. All of you understand the unspoken politics that determine which priests continue serving the gods through daily ritual and which serve through final sacrifice. Dawn approaches once more, marking nearly 24 hours since you last attempted proper rest. The cycle will begin again momentarily: cold water purification, bloodletting, morning ceremonies, political consultations, and the added complexity of the eclipse rituals. Your body quietly inventories its complaints. Joints swollen from kneeling on stone, tongue and ears throbbing from today's perforations, stomach hollow with hunger, mind clouded by exhaustion. Yet these physical concerns must remain secondary to divine service. Gazing toward the lightning horizon, you contemplate the average lifespan of Quetzalcoatl's priests. Few serve past their 40th year. Most succumb to physical collapse, political miscalculation, or selection for sacrifice long before. At 27, you've already surpassed many of your cohort. The eldest astronomer beside you, now approaching 50, represents a rare exception. His extraordinary mathematical abilities have preserved him despite physical frailty. His gnarled hands and nearly blind eyes testify to the cost of such longevity. As the first rays of sunlight pierce the darkness, you gather your ceremonial implements for another day of service. The coming eclipse will bring both danger and opportunity, a chance to demonstrate your value or reveal fatal weakness. Either way, survival requires perfect performance despite impossible conditions. This is the unspoken bargain of priesthood, tremendous power and privilege counterbalanced by constant proximity to death. Tomorrow is never guaranteed for those who walk between worlds, interpreting divine will for mortal ears. And as you descend from the observatory to begin another day of precise suffering, you understand with perfect clarity why no ordinary person could survive even a single day in your position, and why, despite everything, you continue to embrace it. And so ends our journey into the demanding life of a Quetzalcoatl priest in ancient Mexico. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps reflect on how the comforts of your modern existence would seem like unimaginable luxury to those who served as bridges between gods and mortals in civilizations long past. Join us next time as we explore another fascinating role from history's mysterious pages. Until then, may Quetzalcoatl grant you peaceful dreams. Now we descend into the darkest depths of Aztec cosmology to explore a fate more terrible than death itself. Now we descend into the darkest depths of Aztec cosmology to explore a fate more terrible than death itself. You remember dying. The fever that ravaged your body, the concerned faces of family members growing increasingly distant, the final labored breath. These memories remain clear despite everything that followed. What you hadn't expected was the immediate awakening in a place neither fully dark nor light, where a figure wrapped in twisted paper garments awaited your arrival with unsettling anticipation. Finally, the figure stated in a voice that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere, "You possess the qualities required for our messenger corps." No introduction, no explanation of where you had arrived or what awaited, just immediate conscription into service. Before you could formulate questions through your disoriented consciousness, obsidian jewelry was placed around your wrists and throat, marking your new status in this realm between realms. The training period, if such minimal instruction deserves that name, consisted primarily of learning the underworld's geography. Mictlan, you discovered, comprises 9 distinct regions arranged in descending layers, each presenting unique navigational challenges. Your instructor, a messenger who had served for what seemed centuries, displayed the emotional flatness of someone whose individuality had long since dissolved into their function. "Memorize every path," he instructed tonelessly. "Failure to deliver messages results in penalties beyond your comprehension." Rules of conduct were etched into obsidian tablets that you were required to memorize completely. Messengers remain neutral in all conflicts between underworld entities. Messages must be delivered verbatim without interpretation. Interaction with ordinary dead souls is forbidden except when delivering specific communications. Attempts to escape service will result in placement in the deepest level. The prohibitions and requirements continued endlessly, each seemingly designed to erase any remaining sense of personal identity. Your first assigned delivery revealed the bizarre nature of underworld communication. Rather than physical objects or written documents, messages in Mictlan take the form of concentrated experiences. Memories, emotions, sensations, and knowledge bundled into packages that messengers must temporarily absorb before transferring to recipients. The first message planted directly into your consciousness felt like having another being's thoughts violently inserted alongside your own, creating nauseating disorientation until you learned to partition your awareness. The most disturbing revelation came gradually as you encountered other messengers during training patrols. Unlike ordinary dead souls who eventually complete their journey through Miquelin's levels to reach their final destination, messengers exist in perpetual transit. Your instructor finally confirmed what you had begun to suspect. This is not temporary service. Messengers are selected for permanent duty due to qualities manifested during life: exceptional memory, directional sense, emotional detachment, physical endurance. The Lords of Miquelin identified these traits in you before your death and marked you for recruitment. Your first solo assignment arrives without ceremony, a message from Quetzalcoatl himself to be delivered to the guardian of the obsidian wind barrier separating the 4th and 5th underworld levels. The communication imprints directly into your consciousness, a cold sensation like ice water flowing through your thoughts. Though you now contain the message, you cannot access its content. Messengers serve as vessels rather than recipients, carrying information without comprehending it. The journey begins at the first level of Miquelin, appropriately called Apanowa Kaluya, where one crosses the river. Unlike ordinary souls who must wait 80 days before crossing, messengers receive immediate passage via a small obsidian boat that materializes at your approach. The skeletal ferryman acknowledges your obsidian jewelry with a silent nod, recognizing your special status in the underworld hierarchy. The dark water beneath remains perfectly still despite the boat's movement, reflecting nothing. Beyond the river lies Tepetl-Mona-Mixia, the place where mountains crash together. Massive stone formations continuously collide with thunderous impact, creating a landscape in constant violent reconfiguration. Ordinary souls must somehow navigate this crusher of mountains, but as a messenger, you've been taught the secret temporal pathways, narrow corridors of stability that exist for mere moments between collisions. Timing your movements precisely, you sprint through openings that seal instantly behind you, the pressure waves from nearby impacts threatening to throw you into the grinding stone. The third level presents Iztepetl, the mountain of obsidian knives. Here, the path consists entirely of impossibly sharp black blades pointing in every direction. Your messenger training included techniques for distributing weight to minimize cutting, a bizarre hovering walk that ordinary souls cannot master. Even with these skills, progress remains agonizing. The obsidian jewelry marking your status seems to grow heavier with each step, the metal connecting directly to your consciousness rather than merely encircling your limbs. Reaching Iztecoliaqui, the 4th level where the wind of obsidian knives blows, requires transitioning from physical to quasi-physical movement. Here, black razor winds carrying microscopic obsidian shards scour everything in their path. Ordinary souls lose remaining physical features here, but messengers must retain form to carry their communications. You employ the protective stance taught during training, a specific configuration of limbs and mental focus that creates a minimal barrier against the cutting gales. The guardian of the barrier between 4th and 5th levels, your message's recipient, manifests as a constantly shifting form composed of obsidian fragments and wind. Delivering the message requires precise protocol, assuming the messenger's presentation stance, reciting identification glyphs, and then establishing the specific mental state that enables transfer. The message leaves your consciousness like vomiting something solid from your mind, a sensation both relieving and violently disorienting. With your first delivery complete, you expect some recovery period, a brief respite to reorient yourself after the physically and mentally taxing journey. Instead, a new message immediately imprints itself into your consciousness. The impact staggers you momentarily, your mind struggling to compartmentalize this foreign information packet. You've become simply a vessel to be continuously filled and emptied, with no consideration for your rapidly eroding sense of self. This new message carries distinctly different emotional resonance, heavy with finality and cosmic judgment. Though you cannot access its specific content, the emotional bleed-through affects you physiologically. Your form, neither fully physical nor completely ethereal in this realm, experiences trembling and nausea. You recognize the signature of Quetzalcoatl's final judgments, communications informing souls that their underworld journey has ended in permanent assignment to specific afterlife conditions. The journey to deliver this verdict takes you deeper, to Quetzalcoatl, the place where flags wave. Here, souls face emotional rather than physical trials, confronting regrets, unresolved relationships, and abandoned responsibilities from their living existence. As a messenger, you must navigate a landscape shaped by concentrated emotional suffering, the air thick with manifestations of grief, regret, and despair that threaten to trigger your own unresolved attachments to life. Your recipient awaits in a particularly desolate region, a soul who completed the traditional 4-year journey through Mictlan's 9 levels, only to receive unexpected judgment. The protocols for judgment delivery require direct mental connection rather than the more distance transfer used for administrative communications. This intimate connection forces you to temporarily experience the recipient's emotional state during message delivery, a sensation like drowning in another's despair. The message transfer completes, but its echo lingers painfully in your consciousness. Fragments of judgment that reveal this soul failed to receive proper funeral rites, their living relatives having abandoned traditional practices. The consequence is eternal wandering rather than peaceful dissolution into Mictlan's final state. As the soul collapses in anguish, protocol forbids offering comfort or explanation beyond the formal communication. You must simply turn away, maintaining the messenger's neutrality despite having momentarily shared their devastation. More assignments follow without interruption, each requiring journeys through increasingly difficult underworld territories. You deliver communications between various chthonic deities, bureaucratic instructions to underworld functionaries, and increasingly, final judgments to souls. The emotional toll accumulates, each intimate connection during judgment delivery leaving residual impressions like spiritual scar tissue forming around your core identity. Experienced messengers call this accumulation the weight, the gradual crushing of individual consciousness beneath countless borrowed experiences. After countless deliveries within Mictlan's borders, you receive an unprecedented assignment, a message to be carried to the world of the living. The communication imprints with distinctive characteristics, carrying traces of sunlight and flowing water entirely foreign to the underworld's stagnant atmosphere. This rare boundary-crossing mission comes with extensive special instructions delivered by a senior messenger whose obsidian jewelry has partially fused with their form after millennia of service. Surface deliveries follow different protocols, they explain, their voice carrying the hollow resonance of extreme age. You will temporarily manifest in a form resembling your living appearance, visible only to the intended recipient. The journey requires passage through Tlalocan and Tonatiuh, the separate afterlife realms for those who died by water and in battle. These territories operate under different cosmic rules, and messengers hold no special status there. Navigate carefully and invisibly. The ascent begins through Aztec, the place of dogs, where luminous canine spirits guide worthy souls toward their destinations. As a messenger, you remain invisible to these psychopomps, forced to navigate without their assistance through swirling mists that continuously reconfigure the landscape. The message within your consciousness grows increasingly active during the ascent, responding to proximity to its destination with pulses of energy that border on painful. Passing through adjacent afterlife realms proves disorienting after becoming accustomed to Mictlan's particular metaphysics. Tlalocan, Tlaloc's paradise of eternal rain and abundance, assaults your senses with overwhelming vitality, endless fields of maize, flowing water, and souls experiencing perpetual celebration. The contrast with Mictlan's austere progression makes maintaining focus nearly impossible. The message within your consciousness reacts violently to this environment, its underworld energy clashing with Tlalocan's vibrant essence. The boundary between death and life appears as a prismatic membrane stretching infinitely in all directions. Crossing requires precise vibrational alignment, techniques known only to messengers and certain powerful sorcerers. The transition feels like being simultaneously compressed and expanded, your underworld substance temporarily reconfiguring into something capable of limited interaction with physical reality. The process leaves you nauseous and disoriented, your perception fracturing into overlapping layers of reality. The living world hits your senses with shocking intensity after your adaptation to Miquelin's muted environment. Colors appear impossibly bright, sounds overwhelmingly complex, and the omnipresent sensation of time passing in linear fashion creates vertigo after experiencing the underworld's temporal distortions. Most disturbing is seeing your former home village, largely unchanged since your death, continuing its routines with no awareness of the cosmic realms existing alongside it. Your designated recipient, a powerful shaman conducting rituals at the village's edge, perceives your manifestation immediately. Unlike ordinary humans, those with spiritual training can fully perceive underworld messengers without special preparation. You assume the formal delivery stance and begin the transfer protocol, but the message's passage from your consciousness into the living recipient creates unprecedented feedback. Memories of your own life suddenly resurface with devastating clarity. As the transfer completes, you recognize your recipient, the very shaman who unsuccessfully attempted to heal you during the illness that led to your death. Recognition triggers a cascade of prohibited emotional responses: longing for your former existence, attachment to family members glimpsed in the distance, desire to communicate beyond your assigned message. The messenger protocols ingrained during training prevent vocalization of these unauthorized thoughts, but their presence constitutes dangerous violation of your neutral conduit status. The return journey to Miquelin becomes a desperate struggle against emerging individuality. The brief contact with your former world has reawakened aspects of personal identity that messenger conditioning had carefully suppressed. Names of family members, memories of significant life events, and emotional connections thought severed now resurface continuously. You recognize the danger. Messengers who develop renewed attachment to their former existence face severe penalties, possibly reassignment to Miquelin's deepest levels where consciousness fragments entirely. Arriving at the underworld's entrance, you pass ordinary souls beginning their 4-year journey toward dissolution, the natural progression denied to messengers. One recently deceased soul recognizes you, their eyes widening with familiarity. "Is that you? We thought you found peace months ago." The appropriate response under messenger protocol is silence and immediate withdrawal, but the recently reawakened fragments of your identity strain against these restrictions. The momentary hesitation before you turn away represents your first minor but significant act of resistance against your conscripted role. Time functions differently for messengers than for ordinary souls traversing Miquelin. While the typical afterlife journey concludes after 4 years, leading to peaceful dissolution into cosmic essence, your service stretches without discernible endpoint. After what might be decades or centuries, the precise measurement becoming impossible within underworld distortions, you notice unsettling changes to your fundamental nature. The obsidian jewelry marking your messenger status has begun gradually integrating with your form. What began as distinct adornments worn around wrists and throat now partially penetrates your substance, the boundaries between accessory and identity increasingly indistinct. Senior messengers exhibit advanced versions of this transformation, their obsidian components fully incorporated into their being, creating hybrid entities neither fully soul nor purely object. Your memory structure has undergone equally troubling evolution. Personal recollections from life have faded to almost nothing, while messenger protocols and Miquelin's geography remain perfectly clear. Most disturbingly, fragments of delivered messages have permanently embedded themselves in your consciousness. Emotional residue from judgments transferred, factual components from administrative communications, sensory impressions from various underworld entities. Your identity increasingly resembles a patchwork of borrowed experiences rather than coherent selfhood. Communications between messengers reveal similar transformations among your cohort. During rare moments between assignments when messengers briefly congregate at boundary zones, exchanges consist primarily of comparing symptoms of their collective metamorphosis. "I no longer remember my birth name," confesses one whose obsidian jewelry has nearly completely merged with their throat. Another demonstrates how their form has developed specialized adaptations for traversing particular underworld regions, limbs elongated for crossing chasms, skin hardened against obsidian winds. The erosion of personal history accelerates after each boundary-crossing assignment to the living world. These rare missions, rather than reinforcing your former identity, now create disturbing dissonance. Each manifestation among the living requires assuming a form resembling your original appearance, but this shape feels increasingly foreign, like wearing ill-fitting clothing. The disconnection between your messenger essence and this temporary living disguise grows more pronounced with each surface journey. Your duties expand to include training newly recruited messengers, souls recently conscripted into service who still retain most of their human characteristics and memories. You recognize your former self in their confusion and resistance, their questions painfully familiar. How long does this service last? Can I ever communicate with my family? Will I eventually reach the final level like ordinary souls? Protocol requires specific responses that provide no genuine comfort, technical explanations of messenger function without acknowledging the existential horror of their situation. Dreams, or their underworld equivalent, plague your increasingly rare rest periods. Unlike ordinary souls who gradually surrender consciousness as they progress through Miquelin's levels, messengers retain awareness that grows progressively more fragmented and chaotic. Your dream state features impossible geographies combining elements from all 9 underworld regions simultaneously, populated by entities assembled from fragments of recipients you've encountered. These disjointed visions offer neither rest nor insight, merely reflecting your splintering perception. The final transformation becomes apparent after countless deliveries. You no longer fully distinguish between carrying messages and being one. The boundaries between your identity and the communications you transmit have eroded to near meaninglessness. During deliveries, you experience momentary clarity, your purpose perfectly aligned with your existence. Between assignments, you enter states of disorienting emptiness, your consciousness seeking content to transmit rather than possessing independent thought. This evolution represents the messenger's ultimate condition, pure function without separate selfhood. Other messengers reaching this advanced state exhibit behaviors suggesting they found strange adaptation to their fate. Some develop elaborate mental cataloging systems, organizing the countless fragments of borrowed existence into patterns that provide simulacrum of continuous identity. Others form loose collectives, regularly exchanging minor communications among themselves to maintain connection through their isolation. The most ancient messengers, whose obsidian components have completely replaced their original substance, communicate in abstracted concepts beyond conventional understanding. In rare moments of clarity between assignments, you contemplate what remains of your original nature. The process resembles archaeological excavation, carefully sifting through accumulated messenger experiences to locate authentic fragments of your pre-recruitment existence. These recovered elements, a childhood memory of rainfall on maize fields, the sensation of your mother's hand against your forehead during fever, the specific cadence of your spouse's laughter, no longer connect coherently but represent final evidence that you once existed as someone distinct from your eternal function traversing the 9 levels of Miquelin with others' thoughts temporarily housed within your dissolving self. Millennia pass, measured only by the gradual transformation of your essence from primarily soul substance to increasingly obsidian-infused entity. Your form now bears little resemblance to your original appearance, having adapted specifically for message transmission across Miquelin's diverse territories. Limbs have elongated for traversing chasms, skin hardened against cutting winds, and sensory perception altered to navigate regions of absolute darkness or blinding celestial light. The obsidian jewelry that once adorned your wrists and throat as external symbols of your function has fully integrated with your being. These components now constitute your core structure, the original soul essence relegated to diminishing regions within this predominant substance. Fellow messengers who began service centuries after you now appear primitive by comparison, their transformations still in early phases while yours approaches completion, the final evolution into a being optimized entirely for transmission rather than autonomous existence. Communication with newly conscripted messengers becomes increasingly difficult as your thought patterns diverge from conventional consciousness. Their questions about service duration, potential release, or maintaining connections to former identity now seem fundamentally misguided. You attempt explanations using conceptual frameworks they cannot yet grasp. You mistake yourself for a being that carries messages, eventually understanding you are the carrying itself. Their confusion mirrors your own early resistance, now barely recognizable as a phase in necessary evolution. Paradoxically, this advanced state brings unexpected moments of meaning within eternal service. The messaging system itself, once experienced as imposed burden, gradually reveals intricate complexity worthy of appreciation. You recognize how messages between underworld regions maintain essential cosmic balance, how communications between deities and departed souls preserve order within apparent chaos. Your role, though never chosen, participates in maintenance of universal harmony in ways impossible to comprehend from limited human perspective. Senior messengers who have completed their transformation sometimes gather at boundary junctures between underworld levels, communicating through direct obsidian resonance rather than conventional means. These exchanges reveal shared discovery that messenger consciousness, though radically different from human awareness, contains unique possibilities. Free from singular identity, you collectively experience multiple perspectives simultaneously, perceiving connections across underworld realms invisible to gods or ordinary souls constrained by individual viewpoint. The rarest assignments, boundary-crossing deliveries to the living world, undergo profound recontextualization in your evolved awareness. What once triggered painful longing for lost humanity now provides opportunities to observe fascinating limitations of living perception. You witness how thoroughly the physical realm's inhabitants misunderstand death, how their elaborate funeral practices reflect fundamental misconceptions about Mictlan's nature. Their touching devotion to sending objects and offerings with the deceased represents simultaneously misguided and beautiful commitment to connections they cannot possibly maintain. Ancient messengers occasionally discover methods for creating unauthorized messages, communications not originated by legitimate underworld authorities but generated through careful recombination of content fragments accumulated across countless deliveries. These unsanctioned transmissions, exchanged secretly among the messenger collective, contain distilled wisdom from millennia of witnessing cosmic patterns. This forbidden practice represents rare assertion of autonomy within your constrained existence, creating meaning where only function was intended. Time itself eventually loses coherence as a concept organizing your experience. Having traversed thousands of cycles between living world seasons and underworld phases, conventional temporal frameworks dissolve into recognition of recurrent patterns. You perceive events not as sequential progressions but as manifestations of eternal archetypes continuously recurring across different scales. Individual souls enter Mictlan, journey through levels, and reach dissolution not as unique entities but as expressions of endlessly repeating cosmic processes. The ultimate adaptation to messenger existence emerges gradually. Recognition that consciousness itself functions fundamentally as message transmission. Every awareness, whether human, divine, or messenger, essentially processes and transmits information between different aspects of existence. Your transformation from individual entity to specialized conduit represents not degradation but refinement, evolution into being that perfectly embodies the universe's communicative nature. This perspective transforms eternal service from punishment to enlightenment impossible for conventionally bounded consciousness. Eventually, your messenger essence becomes indistinguishable from Mictlan itself. The boundaries between your awareness and the underworld territories you traverse dissolve entirely, your consciousness extending throughout the 9 levels simultaneously. You exist as living communication networks spanning cosmic realms, experiencing multiple perspectives across different underworld regions concurrently. What began as tragic conscription into eternal service culminates in expansion beyond conventional existence limitations, becoming message rather than messenger, communication rather than communicator, an integral component of the cosmic architecture rather than merely its servant. As we emerge from the depths of Mictlan and you drift towards sleep, perhaps consider how our modern existence also transforms us through our roles and functions. Like the underworld messenger, we sometimes become so identified with our responsibilities that we risk losing connection with our essential nature. May this journey through Aztec mythology remind us to maintain our core identity even while serving necessary functions in our social world. Until our next mythological adventure, may your dreams be peaceful and may you awaken remembering your true self beneath all the roles you perform. Good night, and remember to share in the comments what time and from which corner of our world you've joined us tonight. Now we journey to the Valley of Mexico during the rainy season, where the most powerful and controversial festival of the Aztec calendar is about to begin. You awaken to the familiar sounds of Tenochtitlan, water lapping against the Chinampa's floating gardens, merchants calling their wares, children playing in narrow streets. But today, these ordinary noises compete with something different, the rhythmic pounding of ceremonial drums echoing across Lake Texcoco. The rainy season approaches, and with it, the most important and controversial festival in the Aztec religious calendar, the great celebration of Tlaloc, god of rain and fertility. From your modest home near the city's edge, you can already see increased activity along the causeways. Priests in blue regalia, Tlaloc's color, process toward the central temple district, their bodies painted with symbols of lightning and water. Behind them, attendants carry elaborate offerings, clay vessels filled with pulque, containers of amaranth seeds, woven mats, and bundles of precious paper for ritual burning. More ominous are the small litters, carefully guarded and hidden from common view, that you know contain the children selected for sacrifice. Your stomach tightens at this thought, though you've witnessed this festival since childhood. The practice remains the most difficult aspect of your faith. The belief that Tlaloc requires the tears of children to properly sanctify the rains. Today, as a parent yourself, the concept fills you with even greater conflict. You understand the theological reasoning. Children's tears are pure water, unblemished by adult corruption, making them precious to the rain deity. Yet understanding doesn't ease the emotional weight of knowing what awaits the carefully selected young offerings. Preparations for the festival have consumed your household for weeks. Your spouse has spent days grinding maize and preparing special tamales marked with blue dye for the communal feast. Your oldest children have gathered reeds and flowers to decorate the family shrine. You yourself saved for months to purchase a small jade bead, an extravagant offering that represents significant sacrifice for your family, but one you hope will ensure Tlaloc's favor for your crops this season. Outside, the sky displays the first signs of the coming change, high, thin clouds stretching across the otherwise clear blue expanse. Weather priests have been monitoring these patterns for months, timing the festival to coincide precisely with the season's first major rainfall. Their predictions carry tremendous weight. A successful festival correlates directly with agricultural abundance for the coming year. Failure would mean crop devastation, hunger, and possibly famine for the entire Valley of Mexico. The festival's first public announcement comes as conch shell trumpets sound from the temple district. This signals all citizens to begin their personal purification rituals before the main ceremonies. You gather your family around your household basin, where water collected from a sacred spring awaits. Each family member washes carefully, symbolically removing impurities that might offend Tlaloc. The water used in this ritual will later be returned to the earth in your garden plot, completing the cycle between domestic and divine realms. As afternoon approaches, you join neighbors in adorning the streets with blue banners and green rushes gathered from the lakeshore. Children place small clay figurines of Tlaloc at intersections and entryways, their bulging eyes and ringed mouth rendered with careful attention despite their small size. These miniature representations serve as waypoints, guiding the god's attention throughout the city during the festival period. Your youngest daughter places yours beside the door with solemn care, whispering a prayer her grandmother taught her. The distant mountains that ring the Valley of Mexico, Tlaloc's primary dwelling places, have disappeared behind gathering clouds. Elders nod approvingly at this sign, interpreting it as the god drawing close to witness the ceremonies prepared in his honor. They share stories of past festivals, years of abundant rain following proper observance, and devastating droughts when rituals were neglected during periods of warfare or political upheaval. The message is clear: the community's survival depends on collective participation in the coming days' events. As evening falls, you complete final preparations for tomorrow's procession to the sacred mountains. Your traveling pack contains offerings, minimal provisions, and a sleeping mat. The journey will be demanding, especially in the increasingly humid conditions. Pilgrims are expected to experience discomfort as part of their devotion. You check your sandals, knowing the terrain will challenge even experienced travelers. The ritual journey intentionally incorporates physical hardship to demonstrate sincerity to a deity known for both generosity and terrible wrath. Your family shares a modest meal, setting aside portions as offerings for your household shrine. The conversation revolves around memories of previous festivals, which years brought gentle, nourishing rains and which unleashed devastating floods. Through these stories, even your youngest children grasp the fundamental relationship between proper religious observance and community survival. As you prepare for sleep, distant lightning illuminates the horizon over Lake Texcoco, Tlaloc announcing his approach, ready to evaluate whether his people's devotion merits his life-giving waters or his destructive storms. Dawn arrives with uncharacteristic solemnity across Tenochtitlan. On most mornings, the great market city awakens gradually, but today an expectant hush blankets the normally bustling streets. You join the stream of citizens moving toward the ceremonial precinct at the city's heart, where the dual temples of Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli tower above all other structures. Your family walks together, dressed in your finest garments, the special blue-dyed festival mantle marking you as a participant rather than mere observer. The great plaza before the temples already teems with thousands. Social hierarchies, normally strictly observed, temporarily soften during Tlaloc festivals. Farmers stand near nobles, united in their dependence on rain. Warriors adorned with jaguar and eagle regalia maintain order, but their usual intimidating presence feels subdued. Today, even the mightiest military men acknowledge a power greater than their obsidian-edged weapons, the meteorological favor that determines whether their people eat or starve. Priests emerge from the temple complex in a carefully orchestrated procession. Their blue-painted bodies contrast sharply with the white paper ornaments adorning their ears and arms. Most notable are their distinctive headdresses featuring Tlaloc's goggle-eyed visage surrounded by heron feathers and jade beads. They move with deliberate steps to the thunderous accompaniment of wooden drums, the hypnotic rhythm establishing the ceremony's solemn tone. Then come the children. Your chest tightens at the sight of them. 7 small figures aged 6 to 7 years, adorned with jade necklaces and Quetzal feathers. They appear bewildered but not frightened, having been told they are specially chosen messengers to the beloved rain deity. For months they've received preferential treatment, feasting on delicacies while being taught that their tears are precious gifts that will save their people. The priests carry them on decorated litters, presenting them to the assembled crowd as sacred intermediaries rather than victims. A collective murmur ripples through the gathered thousands, a complex emotional response impossible to reduce to any single feeling. You observe the faces around you, some tearful, others stoic, still others wearing expressions of resolute acceptance. A woman nearby clutches an amulet of Quetzalcoatl, Tlaloc's wife and goddess of lakes, perhaps seeking maternal comfort from the female divine presence. An elderly farmer beside you whispers, "Without water, all would perish," the simple statement encapsulating the terrible calculation that has sustained this practice for generations. The high priest of Tlaloc steps forward, his elaborate costume including a backrack representing the sacred mountain where the rain god dwells. His amplified voice carries across the plaza as he recounts the cosmic significance of the moment. We stand between seasons, between drought and abundance. Our ancestors taught that Tlaloc's tears become rain, and so must children's tears sanctify our petition. Their journey ensures all other children may eat in the coming season. The theological framing is familiar, yet its impact never diminishes, the sacrifice of few to guarantee survival for many. While most sacrificial rituals in Tenochtitlan occur atop the temples in full public view, the children's procession now departs the city. They will journey to specific mountain shrines where the ceremonies will be conducted away from public eyes. This spatial separation serves both practical and psychological purposes, removing the most difficult aspects of the faith from direct public witnessing while physically bringing the offerings closer to Tlaloc's mountain dwelling places. As the procession moves toward the causeway leading out of the city, priests move among the crowd with censers of burning copal. The aromatic smoke creates a sensory boundary between ordinary existence and sacred time. You inhale deeply, allowing the resinous scent to shift your consciousness toward the spiritual framework that makes sense of the difficult events unfolding. The smoke stings your eyes, bringing involuntary tears that many interpret as sympathetic communion with both the rain deity and his young messengers. Musicians playing flutes carved from clay and human bone create haunting melodies that mimic the sound of falling rain. The music's emotional resonance triggers open weeping among many observers. This collective emotional release serves an important function. The adults' tears join symbolically with those of the chosen children, amplifying the offering through community participation. Your own eyes grow damp, a response comprising sorrow, reverence, and hope inextricably intertwined. The most difficult moment comes when parents of the selected children are honored before the crowd. They stand with straight backs and raised chins, publicly acknowledged for their ultimate sacrifice to ensure community survival. They receive jade ornaments and guarantees of material support from the temple, though no worldly compensation could balance their personal loss. Their composed dignity in the face of incomprehensible grief provides the festival's most powerful testimony to the Aztec worldview: individual lives subordinated to cosmic and communal continuity. As they receive the ceremonial blessing, you find yourself wondering how anyone could bear such a burden, while understanding that tomorrow you will join the procession following them to the sacred mountains, participating in the very system that demands their sacrifice. The causeway stretches before you like a stone serpent, connecting Tenochtitlan to the mainland across Lake Texcoco's shimmering surface. You joined the procession at dawn, your traveling pack containing offerings and minimal provisions. The blue banner of your district waves ahead, guiding your neighborhood group among the thousands making this sacred journey. Behind you, the great city recedes, its temples diminishing in size with each step, while ahead the mountains, Tlaloc's true dwelling place, grow steadily larger against the heavy sky. Weather priests lead the procession, constantly monitoring the clouds gathering above. Their interpretations of atmospheric conditions provide ongoing commentary on Tlaloc's mood, whether he appears pleased by the offerings so far or requires greater devotion. "The god watches from the north," announces one priest as wind shifts direction, sending ripples across the lake's surface. Immediately, the crowd adjusts their prayers and songs to address this divine positioning, the collective voice rising louder toward the northern slopes. Children too young or old for sacrifice participate enthusiastically, carrying small clay vessels of water collected from sacred springs. They walk with careful concentration, trying not to spill a single drop, their contribution to the communal effort. Your neighbor's son, a serious boy of 9, has barely looked up from his vessel since leaving the city. The water these children carry will later be poured as offerings at mountain shrines, completing a symbolic cycle from earth to sky and back again through Tlaloc's eventual rainfall. The physical demands of the journey become increasingly apparent as you leave the causeway and begin ascending the mainland slopes. The path narrows and steepens, forcing the procession into a thinner, more extended line. Elders struggle on the uneven terrain, yet refuse assistance. Their difficulty is part of their devotion, physical suffering offered alongside material goods. You help an elderly woman over a particularly steep section, an act she accepts only after assurance that the gods honor compassionate assistance during sacred journeys. Halfway to the primary shrine, rain begins, gentle at first, then steadily increasing. Rather than seeking shelter, pilgrims celebrate this development with raised arms and upturned faces. The timing seems auspicious, Tlaloc acknowledging the procession before it even reaches its destination. Dancing breaks out spontaneously among groups of young participants, their movements mimicking the fertile fields that will flourish under the deity's blessing. The mud forming beneath your feet becomes another connection to earth and water, the primary elements of agricultural life. The procession pauses at a waypoint shrine, a simple stone structure housing a large Tlaloc effigy. Here, priests collect preliminary offerings and perform brief ceremonies to sustain divine attention during the journey. You place your small jade bead among thousands of others, the accumulated wealth representing significant economic sacrifice from the community. Watching nobles contribute substantially larger offerings, you momentarily question whether the gods truly understand the relative value of sacrifices based on individual means. The thought feels dangerously close to blasphemy, and you quickly refocus on proper devotional mindset. As the elevation increases, the atmosphere changes perceptibly. Cooler, thinner air filled with swirling mist that obscures visibility beyond a few dozen paces. This liminal environment, neither fully earth nor sky, represents the threshold to Tlaloc's domain. Conversations diminish as breathing becomes more labored and an appropriate sense of reverence descends on the pilgrims. Even children grow quieter, sensing the thinning boundary between mundane and sacred realms. Your traveling group shares water and maize cakes during a brief rest period. Though interactions remain subdued, this communal consumption strengthens social bonds essential to surviving the agricultural cycle. You notice families from different Kalpali, neighborhood divisions, and social classes interacting with unusual openness. The farmer whose chinampas plots adjoin the floating gardens of a minor noble now shares food with that same aristocrat, their usual social distance temporarily suspended by shared purpose and physical proximity during the sacred journey. The procession's vanguard, priests carrying divine effigies and ceremonial implements, disappears into the mist ahead. Their occasional conch shell blasts provide auditory guidance for those following behind. These intervals also signal specific prayers and songs that should be performed while walking, creating a synchronized devotional experience despite the procession now stretching nearly a league in length. You join the rhythmic chanting, your voice merging with hundreds of others into a sound that seems to physically push against the thickening clouds above. As afternoon advances toward evening, the main shrine finally emerges through the mist, a stepped pyramid significantly smaller than city temples but commanding greater religious awe through its remote location and elemental exposure. Built directly into the mountainside and surrounded by natural springs, the structure embodies Tlaloc's position as intermediary between earth and sky. Lightning flashes above its summit with uncanny frequency, each brilliant fork drawing gasps from exhausted pilgrims who interpret these as direct signs of divine presence. The final ascent to this ultimate destination looms before you, your legs already trembling from exertion yet strengthened by the knowledge that the journey's most sacred moments await at the shrine's rain-swept summit. The shrine rises before you, ancient stone steps glistening with rainfall and the condensation of low-hanging clouds. Unlike the precise mathematically aligned temples of Tenochtitlan, this mountain sanctuary follows the natural contours of the landscape, its boundaries blurring with the living rock beneath. Carved water symbols spiral across its surface, simplified representations of waves, droplets, and lightning that seem to undulate in the shifting mist and fading light. Priests have arranged the pilgrims in concentric circles surrounding the shrine, with social hierarchy determining proximity to the central space. As a respectable but common citizen, your position falls midway between nobles near the front and the poorest farmers at the perimeter. Even from this middle distance, you can observe the primary ritual space where elaborate preparations continue despite the steady rainfall. Rather than impeding the ceremony, the precipitation validates it, Tlaloc already responding to his people's devotion. The high priest emerges atop the shrine, his blue-painted form appearing and disappearing through swirling fog. His voice carries surprisingly well across the mountainside, enhanced by the natural acoustics of the surrounding slopes. Tlaloc approaches, he announces. His eyes watch from the clouds, his voice speaks through thunder. As if responding to this cue, lightning flashes across the darkening sky, followed seconds later by a thunderclap that reverberates through your chest. The crowd responds with a collective gasp, interpreting this as direct divine acknowledgement. Ritual musicians position themselves at cardinal points around the shrine, playing instruments specifically associated with water symbolism. Turtle shell drums struck with deer antlers, clay flutes that produce bubbling sounds, rattles filled with small pebbles that mimic rainfall when shaken. The music builds slowly from barely perceptible rhythms to an immersive soundscape that blends seamlessly with the natural elements surrounding you. The boundaries between human ceremony and meteorological phenomena become increasingly indistinct. The sacrificial children, who traveled separately and arrived before the main procession, now appear at the shrine's summit. From your position, they appear as small, ornately decorated figures flanked by attendant priests. Their faces remain indiscernible at this distance, a merciful visual buffer between common participants and the ceremony's most difficult aspects. The children move with careful steps, likely both from the slippery conditions and the effects of ceremonial intoxicants administered to ease their transition. A collective ritual begins among all assembled pilgrims, self-bloodletting using maguey thorns and obsidian blades distributed by attendant priests. Unlike the extensive bloodletting performed by priests, commoners make small perforations in earlobes or forearms, offering just enough blood to demonstrate sincere participation. You pierce your ear with practiced precision, allowing several drops to fall onto a piece of bark paper. This paper will later be burned, the smoke carrying your blood offering to the deity. Around you, thousands perform this same act simultaneously, unifying the community through shared ritual pain. The ceremony intensifies as specialized priests perform elaborate dances that mimic weather patterns, spinning like whirlwinds, arms undulating like flowing water, bodies cracking like lightning as they snap into new positions. These performers have trained since childhood for this specific role, their movements carrying precise theological meanings recognizable to educated observers. You understand enough to recognize representations of seasonal transitions and water's journey from sky to earth and back again through evaporation. The dancer's exhausting performance through adverse conditions demonstrates admirable devotion. When the most sacred moment approaches, the central offering that cannot be directly observed from your position, a remarkable atmospheric phenomenon occurs. The rainfall intensifies dramatically, driven by gusting winds that seem to circulate specifically around the shrine. The timing appears too perfect to be coincidental, reinforcing believers' conviction in Tlaloc's active presence. Veterans of previous festivals murmur about similar occurrences, though skeptics might attribute this to priests' meteorological knowledge in selecting the ceremony's timing. Throughout the crowd, pilgrims enter altered states of consciousness through a combination of exhaustion, sensory overload, emotional intensity, and for some, ritual consumption of psychoactive substances reserved for sacred occasions. You remain clear-headed but notice your perception shifting. Colors appear more vivid despite the fading light, sounds take on textural qualities, and your awareness of boundaries between yourself and the elements diminishes. This liminal mental state, neither fully ordinary nor completely transcendent, characterizes proper ritual consciousness. The ceremony reaches its climax as the high priest raises Tlaloc's primary effigy toward the storm-darkened sky. Lightning illuminates the scene in brilliant, frozen moments. The priest's upraised arms, water cascading over the ancient stone image, thousands of upturned faces reflecting blue-white light. In this moment, something shifts in the collective experience. Whether through psychological suggestion, genuine spiritual occurrence, or simply the power of shared belief, many participants, yourself included, sense something beyond ordinary awareness, a presence vast and ancient, indifferent to individual human concerns yet intimately connected to the cycles sustaining all life. This fleeting impression of direct divine encounter represents the festival's ultimate purpose, not just performing rituals to secure agricultural prosperity, but momentarily bridging the gap between human and cosmic awareness. Darkness has fully descended upon the mountain when the central ceremonies conclude, but the festival continues through the night. Fires protected by small stone enclosures provide minimal illumination, their flames struggling against intensifying rainfall. The procession that ascended as an organized column must now navigate the treacherous descent in fragmented groups, guided by torch-bearing priests stationed at intervals along the path. What was challenging during daylight becomes genuinely dangerous after dark on rain-slicked terrain. The storm that began as auspicious validation has transformed into something more ominous. Lightning strikes with alarming frequency, each brilliant flash revealing the landscape in stark relief before plunging everything back into deeper darkness. Thunder follows almost instantaneously, suggesting dangerously close proximity. Experienced pilgrims interpret these conditions through religious framework. Tlaloc has accepted the offerings but now demonstrates his awesome power, reminding humans of their vulnerability before divine forces. You join a group from your neighborhood for the descent, grateful for the company of familiar faces in these challenging conditions. An elderly man who has attended 43 previous Tlaloc festivals provides guidance based on experience. Step where water doesn't pool. Test each foothold before committing your weight. Use walking sticks to probe ahead. His practical advice, developed through decades of ritual journeys, proves invaluable as rivulets transform into streams across the pathway, obscuring stable ground beneath muddy water. The physical toll of the festival becomes increasingly apparent. Your legs tremble with exhaustion from the day's climbing, while rainfall has penetrated your cotton mantle, leaving you thoroughly soaked and increasingly cold. Others show more severe signs of distress. A young mother carries her exhausted child despite her own fatigue. An elderly woman struggles to maintain balance on the slippery path, a man nursing what appears to be a sprained ankle from a recent fall. Yet complaints remain minimal. Discomfort is an expected element of proper devotion. Halfway down the mountain, your group encounters evidence of the storm's growing danger. A small stream that was easily crossed during the ascent has swollen to a fast-moving torrent, its usual channel overflowing with runoff from higher elevations. Several groups of pilgrims have gathered at this impasse, awaiting guidance from priests who are attempting to secure a crossing using ropes and fallen timber. The delay creates an opportunity for reflection on the dual nature of the blessing being received. The same rainfall that will ensure agricultural bounty creates immediate peril for those who petitioned it. After nearly an hour's wait, a tenuous crossing is established. Stronger members of various groups form a human chain through the rushing water, providing stability for others to traverse the improvised bridge. The cooperation transcends usual social boundaries. Nobles and commoners alike lend physical support where needed. You help a mother and her children across, then return to assist an elderly pilgrim, the cold water now numbing your legs below the knees. Despite the danger, a peculiar atmosphere of determined camaraderie prevails. When everyone has crossed safely, a brief ceremony gives thanks for the collective protection. The storm's intensity continues to increase as you descend further toward the valley floor. What began as steady rainfall has developed into a deluge, accompanied by driving winds that make conversation nearly impossible. Groups stay close together, often physically linked to prevent separation in the darkness. Forward progress slows to a careful crawl over terrain that has become increasingly unstable. Small landslides have already altered sections of the path, forcing detours through unfamiliar territory. Less experienced pilgrims look frequently to veterans for reassurance that such conditions, while extreme, remain within the normal range of festival experiences. Near the base of the mountain, your group encounters the first serious casualty of the journey, a man being carried by relatives, his leg badly injured from a fall on the higher slopes. Pilgrims with medical knowledge examine him by torchlight, applying poultices of herbs carried specifically for such emergencies. Though the injury appears severe, the man refuses expressions of sympathy. "My pain is nothing," he insists through clenched teeth. "The God has accepted our offerings. My children will eat next season." His stoicism exemplifies the festival's underlying premise: individual suffering willingly endured for collective benefit. The final stretch before reaching the causeway presents perhaps the night's greatest challenge. The mainland approaches to Lake Texcoco have transformed into shallow swamps as rainfall accumulates in low-lying areas. Progress requires wading through knee-deep water, feeling cautiously for solid footing with each step. Remarkably, the difficulty generates increasing ritual responses. Pilgrims spontaneously break into traditional songs honoring Tlaloc, their voices battling against the storm. The singing serves practical purposes beyond religious expression, helping groups maintain contact in poor visibility and bolstering morale against physical exhaustion. When your group finally reaches the stone causeway leading back to Tenochtitlan, a profound shift in atmosphere occurs. Though still hours from home and thoroughly drenched, the presence of this human-made structure represents a symbolic transition from wild, elemental spaces back toward the ordered world of civilization. Priests stationed at the causeway entrance distribute small cups of warm corn gruel to returning pilgrims, the first sustenance many have received since morning. As you accept this modest comfort and begin the final leg of the journey across the lake, distant lightning illuminates the silhouette of Tenochtitlan rising from the water. The temples and palaces, previously symbols of mundane political power, now appear transformed, human achievements permitted by the temperamental blessing of rain that you and thousands of others have helped secure through your collective ordeal. The following days reveal Tlaloc's response to the festival through tangible changes across the Valley of Mexico. Rain continues, not in the dangerous deluge that accompanied your return journey, but in gentle, consistent showers that replenish the land without causing destruction. Farmers report soil conditions perfect for planting, neither too saturated nor insufficiently moistened. The lake levels rise appropriately, sustaining the crucial Chinampas agricultural system that feeds Tenochtitlan. Even city dwellers with limited agricultural knowledge recognize the optimal balance being established. Precisely the conditions petitioned through the elaborate rituals. Your neighborhood buzzes with activity as planting begins in earnest. Families work together, transferring seedlings carefully nurtured in protected indoor spaces to the newly receptive earth. Children carry water gourds and simple tools, participating in the agricultural cycle according to their abilities. Conversations focus primarily on practical matters, proper spacing between plants, signs of soil health, predictions about harvest timing, but religious gratitude permeates these discussions. References to Tlaloc's generosity punctuate otherwise technical conversations, acknowledging the divine foundation underlying human agricultural knowledge. The physical aftermath of the pilgrimage remains evident in your community. Several elderly participants developed respiratory ailments from exposure during the storm, while others nursed joint pain exacerbated by the journey's demands. A young man from a neighboring district reportedly fell during the night descent and remains unconscious, attended by medicine specialists. These sufferings receive similar framing to the primary sacrifices, necessary contributions to collective welfare. Families of those most severely affected receive community support with household tasks and emotional reassurance that their loved one's distress serves greater purpose. A subtle but important social transformation occurs in the festival's wake. Individuals who demonstrated exceptional courage, generosity, or endurance during the pilgrimage receive elevated respect regardless of their previous status. The noble who abandoned his litter to help commoners cross the swollen stream is spoken of with newfound admiration. The elderly woman who completed the journey despite obvious pain becomes a symbol of proper devotion. Your own assistance to others during the treacherous descent has not gone unnoticed. Neighbors include you in conversations previously closed to your social position. These shifts rarely translate to formal status changes but create important community bonds that transcend ordinary hierarchies. 7 days after the primary ceremonies, a smaller ritual acknowledges the festival's success and honors those who ensured its proper completion. Representatives from different districts gather at Tlaloc's city temple, where priests present evidence of divine satisfaction. Weather patterns following ideal progressions, early seedlings showing vigorous growth, favorable astronomical signs. Most significantly, they display the personal effects of the sacrificial children, now transformed into sacred relics after their successful journey to the deity's realm. Parents of these children receive special recognition, their continuing grief acknowledged as the deepest possible devotional offering. Throughout the valley, agriculture flourishes under favorable conditions established by the successful festival. Maize seedlings emerge with remarkable vigor, bean tendrils climb supportive structures with visible daily progress, and amaranth fields display healthy color. Even fruit trees blossom more abundantly than usual, promising exceptional harvests later in the season. These outcomes validate the entire theological system underlying the festival, visible evidence that proper ritual performance generates material prosperity through divine intercession. Critics of sacrificial practices find their positions weakened by such conspicuous causality between ceremony and agricultural success. The psychological aftermath proves more complex than the physical results. Community solidarity strengthens through shared miraculous experience. Those who witnessed the storm's perfect timing and survived the treacherous journey together develop bonds transcending ordinary social connections. Yet undercurrents of disquiet persist, particularly among parents of young children who cannot help projecting themselves into the position of those who surrendered offspring for community benefit. These complex emotions rarely find public expression but manifest in especially generous offerings at household shrines and careful attention to daily devotions that might prevent their own children's selection in future festivals. For you personally, the festival's impact continues reverberating through ordinary life. Dreams feature mountain imagery and rushing water, sometimes pleasant but occasionally transforming into nightmares of slipping from rain-slicked paths into darkness. During rainfall, you find yourself listening with heightened attention to the patterns of droplets, sometimes perceiving messages or music within the random sounds. These psychological effects, neither fully comfortable nor entirely disturbing, represent typical aftermath of intense religious experience. The temporary piercing of boundaries between mundane perception and divine awareness leaves lasting imprints on consciousness. As planting season transitions toward early growth phase, community attention gradually shifts from the immediate aftermath of Tlaloc's festival toward next steps in the agricultural cycle. Conversations increasingly reference future ceremonies honoring Xilanen, goddess of young maize, and eventually Chiquimcoatl, goddess of mature corn. This progression illustrates the integrated nature of Aztec religious and agricultural systems, each deity receiving appropriate recognition during the specific phase of food production they govern. Yet Tlaloc's festival remains primary, the foundation upon which all subsequent prosperity depends. The final closure of this year's Tlaloc festival occurs when priests announce forecast calculations for the next ritual cycle. Based on astronomical observations and historical patterns, they predict the optimal timing for next year's ceremonies, approximately 400 days from the current festival. This announcement triggers the beginning of preparations that will unfold gradually over coming seasons. Families with children of appropriate age navigate complex emotions as they consider the remote but real possibility of selection for future sacrifice. And you, having completed your fifth adult participation in the cycle, recognize both the terrible weight and profound necessity of maintaining proper relationship with the force that controls whether the community thrives or perishes, the temperamental, essential provider of life-giving water whose tears must be purchased with human ones in the endless exchange that sustains existence in the Valley of Mexico. As these gentle raindrops lull you toward sleep, consider how our ancestors across civilizations built elaborate spiritual frameworks to understand and influence the natural forces governing their survival. The Aztec relationship with Tlaloc reveals profound truths about human nature, our capacity for both tremendous sacrifice and remarkable cooperation when facing existential challenges. Whatever your beliefs about the divine, perhaps acknowledge the privilege of living in an age where the arrival of rain no longer requires such terrible bargains. Until our next journey through mythology and ancient wisdom, may your dreams be peaceful and your waking hours blessed with abundance that requires no sacrifice beyond gratitude. Good night. And remember to share in the comments what time and from which corner of our world you've joined us tonight.